there were a number of people who wanted to introduce Mike Peevey. Dan Cameron had won the lottery, and I had a long introduction of Dan prepared, which was going to give you a little bit more insight into more of our faculty. But in fact, Dan did not make it, and Mason Willrich would love to make the introduction, given that he's known Michael for a long period of time. So, Mason, would you do the honors?
Thank you very much, Jim, and it is my pleasure to pinch hit. I could introduce myself as Dan Cameron, but that wouldn't work very well. However, I have known Mike a long time, and it goes back to 1973, I believe, when Mike was the executive director of something called the California Energy and Environmental Balance and Economy. Thanks, Bill. I was going to get to you in a moment. And this is great because you won't intimidate me, but Bill, I remember you well when I was joined PG&E and you were president of the California Public Utilities Commission. So I know I've got a difficult audience here, and I'm going to be very, very brief. Moving from 1973, our speaker, Michael Peevey, is currently president of the California Public Utilities Commission. Between that, 1973 and now, he was president of Edison International and Southern California Edison, which is the utility serving Southern California. And also went on from there to establish New Energy Ventures, which was a pioneer in an energy services company that provided energy services to a variety of customers that wanted something maybe a little more efficient than the incumbent utility was providing, or a different range of services. So he's had a distinguished career in industry, and then he was appointed in 2002 to the California Public Utilities Commission. And I must say that from the point of view of this school, that from my perspective, Mike has been a signal contributor to California energy policy making. And he has championed a cooperation amongst the various agencies involved in California energy policy, the PUC, but also the California Energy Commission, the California Air Resources Board, and including something I'm involved with, which operates the transmission grid for the state. And he has been signal in bringing forth cooperation from several key regulatory agencies, and agreed upon what is called the California Loading Order, which is energy efficiency first, renewable second, and conventional energy resources for the grid third. He is going to talk to us tonight about the perfect topic for this school: creativity in the public sector. Mike Peevey.
Well, thank you very much, Mason, and it is a pleasure to be here with you. And Mason is a little modest in his own role. He was a very senior officer at PG&E and headed up their non-utility portion of their business for some time, and he now chairs the California Independent System Operator, which is a very important job. It's the California Independent System Operator operates a transmission system in the state, and it's this kind of funny agency that's needed. It's not a state agency, it's kind of a federal agency, but the state, the governor makes the board appointees. So he's one of 5 members of that board, and it's their executive officer, a fellow named Yakut Mansour, who's doing a wonderful job. And it is true that there's much greater cooperation probably than amongst these energy agencies, as he mentioned, than is the case in the past. And I'd like to think it's probably, being not a cynic, but being a realist, is probably due to the fact that we're all somewhat advanced age and don't have many independent ego drives left or new careers to try to launch. And so it does give you a little different perspective, perhaps. I don't know, but speak for yourself, Mike. Yeah, I know. Dean Knox said to me, "What are you going to do next when your term is up?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know yet." So we'll see. But and I have to say I have some ties here with the Goldman School. My chief of staff, Nancy Ryan, teaches here, 1 class a semester at 5 p.m. on Mondays, which you'll get the relevance of that in a moment. And my chief energy advisor, his name is Andrew Schwartz, is also a product of the Goldman School. If you think I'm at all partial to Berkeley, you're probably right, having graduated and got an MA here. And my wife teaches a course here at the same time that Nancy Ryan teaches a course. She teaches 2 courses. Well, one is kind of a, have these wonderful people come in and entertain the students, right? And I think Bill Bagley, we all, everybody in the room know who Bill Bagley is? Bill Bagley, huh? I mean, everybody does know, right? You should say a word. Well, I mean, Bill Bagley was the student body president here in 1949. I know that because I went to a football game here and I saw him out on the field in all this blue and gold regalia, and he was introduced as such. He's also Phi Beta Kappa, and was one of the youngest members of the legislature ever when he was first elected, I think in 1960. Although, I don't know, Jack McCarthy was right in there with you, wasn't he? So we got my wife teaching 2 courses here. Bagley was her first in this open course where people come in and students come and others come, like the dean and others. And then she had Willie Brown. And then she's had a few others. And I think in the next few weeks she's having John Burton. Now, those of you who know anything about John Burton know that that will be somewhat markedly different than maybe not Bill Bagley, but certainly Willie Brown. Willie arrived in limousine that my wife, I think, paid for. I don't know if she... He insisted on someone picking him up and bringing him over here. And, of course, he dresses in Armani, if not Zegna, or, Brioni. And I assure you, Burton will have none of those qualities. He will be profane, maybe profound. It's a good chance to be profound. You certainly be profane, I can guarantee you that. Anybody knows him, I won't go any further than that. Okay, so I was asked to talk about change and making government relevant and working for the people and all that stuff. And I have to say it's a somewhat challenging task because it's not an easy assignment to try to make it happen, and sustain it is even more difficult. I want to talk about the Public Utilities Commission, and with us tonight is the Executive Director of the PUC, Paul Clannon, who gets to actually try to implement some of the things that we on high as commissioners decide ought to be policy and all that kind of thing.
Can I borrow a pen from somebody?
Yes. We're very tight at the budget at the PUC. I want Elizabeth Hill to note that, so we don't get some of the scathing reviews we've got in the past from the Legislative Analyst's Office on the governor's budget. How many positions now, Paul, do we have?
Not enough.
996. I'm determined to keep it under 1,000 for another year, but no, 900. And you'd be amazed today. We had a commission meeting today. This is just a little insight in life, but we had a commission meeting today, and we had all kinds of new employees introduced. And there were several from this school, and there were several from Harvard and from Duke, and one or two even from Stanford. I thought they always went into the private sector, but and there was a scattering of others. And it was an incredible sense you felt of talent coming to work at this public agency, which for various times in its 100-year history in California has been somewhat of an obscure backwater. Not a backwater to the utilities, which was their life and blood, but to many others. I went on the commission in 2002, March 2002. It was right at the tail end of the California electricity crisis, so-called. It was a tumultuous time, and after effects of it still kind of like an earthquake, you know, kind of ripples a little bit as we try to collect some of the monies that were taken unreasonably from California at the time. I went there in 2002, having worked for, and I was appointed by Gray Davis. You all remember Gray Davis? He was once governor of California. He's now an attorney in private practice in Los Angeles. And he seems much happier, actually. I see this as not solely a one-party audience here, or maybe just true objectivity came out. But in any case, and in 2001, I spent about 2 months in his office as an unpaid volunteer trying to cope with aspects of the energy crisis. And at the end of that time, we, myself and a fellow named David Friedman, who used to be head of SMUD and also the head of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and at one time head of the Tennessee Valley Authority, and a third person, wrote a report to the governor about our experiences and what ought to be done. And I went back and looked at that report, Paul, and we said in there, amongst other things relevant to the PUC, we said the PUC is a dysfunctional agency, and it has to be reformed. That was March of 2002. We spent 2.5 hours with him in his office in Los Angeles, going over page by page this report. He took copious notes, and none of it ever saw the light of day. It's just the way it is sometimes in government. But in 2002, when I went on the public utility, so at the end of that meeting, he said, would you go on the public utility sector? I said, there's no vacancy there. He said, well, if there was one. And a year later, one of the Republican members left unexpectedly for health reasons, and it all worked out. And as Bill Bagley remember, because he was my counselor at the time, consigliere. But what happened to Mr. DeLuca anyway? Is he gone for good?
He had to leave early. He'll be back here.
I thought he'd like those words I just used, counselor, consigliere. But at any rate.
Good man.
Good, DeLuca. So in any case, when I went on the PUC, here we are, Peter Darby's here, the CEO of PG&E, but at that time he was the CFO and PG&E was in bankruptcy. And had been in bankruptcy for close to a year, I guess it was. I think it was April 2001 you filed for bankruptcy, so this would be March 2002. They were in bankruptcy, and the state, PG&E wanted to get out from under California regulation because they thought it was the world's worst thing, and it was, and they had all kinds of rationales and reasons for it. Some of which were, maybe reasonable at the time, some weren't. But the PUC fought it like crazy, and the federal bankruptcy judge didn't know what to do with it, so he ended up saying, "You guys settle the thing, and amongst yourselves." And we did, between his predecessor Bob Glenn and myself and a federal bankruptcy judge. Edison, Southern California Edison, the company I'd been the president of, was not in bankruptcy, but right on the edge of bankruptcy. I mean, it was teetering there. The state had gone into the power business, and it still is in the power business. Department of Water and Power, the State Department of Water and Power, which runs a water project. But I mean, it had no background in power, other than it generated about 1,000 megawatts of power for its various facilities. It was in the power business. Crazier than all get out, and much more conservative in behavior once they got into it than anything one would have expected or seen. The state financially was absolutely broke. My wife was got elected in 2000 to the State Assembly. She served 3 terms in the State Assembly. When she ran for office, it was anticipated the state's surplus would be $8 billion. And there was like $8 billion. By the time she got to Sacramento and been there 3 months, it was all gone. It was all gone. I mean, it was just amazing. The state backstopped the utilities and bought power, and Gray Davis said we can't have a rate increase, and the situation was just going crazy, and nothing was happening. And of course, Gray was running for re-election. At the commission itself, he had sent people to the commission who, I mean, frankly, were a tribute to it being a backwater, but did not have the background in terms of knowledge or perspective to deal with something of the magnitude that was. And I'm being charitable in that. And they also had other axes to grind, but I won't get into that. The staff was in turmoil. I think most of the division heads had been replaced in these kind of, late Saturday night beheading kind of things. The general counsel and the head of the chief administrative law judge. And when I got there, she was just in the process of firing one chief administrative law judge. Another one came in, looked around, 60 days later left. Said, this place is crazy. I mean, that was the environment. And the Public Utilities Commission was at war with every other state agency of note. It wasn't at war with DMV, but that's only enough other people were. But we fought with the Energy Commission on everything, fought with the ARB on everything, it fought with the Cal ISO on everything, and it fought with the Department of Water Resources on every issue, particularly how much money the Water Resources Agency had. That was the environment at the Public Utilities Commission. It truly was worse than I imagined as a dysfunctional agency. I hope that's not the case today. And let me go through now some things about that. Because I want to talk about some principles in terms of government and how government has to operate, or should operate, not has to, but should operate, some of the basic principles that, and it's, this school and many others you spent a lot of time reading about, reinventing government, the movements, Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, and all these kind of things. So I'd like to mention some of these and discuss how we are trying to use them at the Public Utilities Commission. Because frankly, while we're not perfect, we've made some significant strides in the last several years. And I think we can do even better if we continue to follow these principles. The first one is need for a well-defined mission that makes sense for the organization and translates objectives into concrete goals. This is true for any organization, whether it's PG&E, whether it's the DMV, or whether it's the California Public Utilities Commission. We didn't have that at the PUC. There was not a clear, and there still is not today, I would have to say, in many respects, not a clear, well-defined mission in terms of everybody sharing in it. One of the things that we did in 1993, we came up with something that the Public Utilities Commission did and the California Energy Commission did, and we had something that was a product of the electricity crisis called the California Power Authority. It came and went in the gnat's eyelash. It shows you that the government can dispose of agencies it creates that were useless to begin with. Takes time, perhaps, but this was the only box, I think, that Schwarzenegger ever blew up. Remember when he came in, he was going to blow up all the boxes? He did blow up the Power Authority box. It was gone. But there was a time there where it existed, and the idea of the Power Authority was to build power plants if the utilities wouldn't build power plants, and it had bonding capacity of $5 billion, and it could go out and bloat this. It found out that they couldn't borrow money any cheaper than anybody else, so there was really not much of a market for it. It had one or two small products, but there were some very good people involved in it. David Friedman, Sonny McPeak, some of you may know Sonny McPeak. She used to be the head of the Business Transportation Housing Agency of the state. Very, very able person. David Friedman, myself, a couple people from the Energy Commission, we got together and we said, the state needs an energy plan. We need something to rely on going forward. And you particularly need it for an agency like the PUC, which is in San Francisco. It's not even in Sacramento. And we came up, and Mason made reference to this, we came up with something called the Energy Action Plan for California. And it was adopted by the California Power Authority, It was adopted unanimously there, adopted unanimously by the Energy Commission, and adopted by at the PUC by a 3-2 vote after a lot of debate. Probably another reflection of some of the difficulties. But the point was that it devised a new role for the agency itself. And it was to develop and implement policies, not deal with items seriatim, which is the nature, had been the nature of the way things work there. And we came up with several different things. We said that, as Mason said, the first thing is we have to have a priority list, which we call loading order, because it seemed like kind of a nice buzzword, but it's the same as a priority list, a list of important items to do. And the first was energy efficiency, and we just had another big decision today in that, and we're investing a lot of the people's money, and the utilities are now very much into the energy efficiency business, trying to improve things, the lighting in rooms like this, which could be improved. And Mr. Clanton will be back here tomorrow morning at my instructions with some fluorescent light bulbs throughout all these buildings here. But in any case, energy efficiency. Then we said number 2 was renewables. That's solar, wind, biomass, geothermal, and all that. And we had to do these things. These were set forth as priorities that we thought would bind the PUC staff, the Energy Commission staff, the ARB staff, the California ISO staff, and so on and so forth. And you know, and it's now been modified and expanded to deal with climate change. But it's all the example I'm trying to give you in setting a goals was in the electricity sector was to have a well-defined mission. Now, we're not only in business to regulate the energy utilities, we regulate the light rail, we regulate the lemos that go to the airports, not exactly one that consumes a lot of my time personally, but, and you know, like super shuttle and those kind of things. And we also, however, regulate telecom, which is a huge industry. And we have also developed policies there that are more overriding policies. And we have accepted the notion that that industry is undergoing radical change. The technology is outpacing the ability of regulators, frankly, to keep up with it. This is not a universally shared view, but it's certainly a majority view. And that traditional rate regulation, where you decide how much the basic bill is and all this kind of stuff, is probably increasingly irrelevant if you have competitive markets. And we have moved in that direction, I think, and seen our role more to be an educator, to be a monitor, and to vigorously enforce fraud in the marketplace than trying to regulate every last detail. We've had problems with the legislature on this because they, you know, the legislature is a great body, but they really don't like anybody to innovate but themselves. And they don't like the executive branch to innovate. I've heard these lectures from several, Liz, of your reputed bosses about how, you know, you're there to implement the policies that we establish. And there's probably a healthy dynamic between the two there because good ideas come both ways. But at any rate, so those are some things we do under number 1. Number 2 is trying to stay focused and honestly assess situations. These are management principles that apply, as I said, and even when unanticipated obstacles materialize, like his phone call. Listen, as much as it pains me, I believe in free speech and the right of inquiry, and someplace on this campus at some point she's been. I think Bruce Caden found a spot for her. Not any longer here?
She was here.
She was here. Oh, well, okay. Thank you for, I'm sure you invited her tonight.
We're our support.
Yeah. any rate, stay focused, honestly assess situations and anticipate obstacles and do that. We've tried to do that internally, I think, by moving more toward a team approach than individuals. And we've tried to enhance collaboration and to anticipate challenges and move on them. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly. 3 is to define meaningful performance measures and assess progress against them rigorously, which means constant reassessment. And that's up to the staff to do, by and large, and the division directors, the energy division, and the executive director and his staff. And I think we're doing a decent job of that. And the 4th is to be customer focused. Now, what is the customer focus of the Public Utilities Commission? That's a little more difficult to define. I mean, who is the customer for us? Obviously, it's ratepayers. People that pay their bills. It's consumers of electricity and gas and telecom and all that. But it's not only that. We also have many other customers. We have the utilities, in a sense, are our customers. They have to have a reasonable return on investment. They have to be able to invest in California. They have to be incentivized, and they also have to be penalized. Financial institutions are part of the mix, the whole Wall Street syndrome. We need and they demand reasonable return on investment and clarity of the rules. They're always telling us the rules aren't clear enough. How can we ever invest in California if we don't know? Actually, they still seem to come here quite a bit. We have power plant developers and renewable and conventional, both, and they need the same thing. And we try to do all this with an open door policy that is successful, I think, to a significant degree. You can go to our website and download almost everything we do is there if you have the patience to go through a fairly usable website. It's not as obscure as some in government can be, very frankly. The 5th principle is we've tried to push authority down in the organization, through it, and create and empower people. And try to have people see their assignments and their roles as responsibilities rather than simply jobs. That, I think, the jury's out as how successful we'll be on that. I think we're trying pretty good. 6th, we try to get the right people. We have to be, as leaders, myself and my colleagues, ambitious for the organization, not just for ourselves. And that's probably a function of age, that we could be a little more for the organization, a little less for ourselves, and be able to work in a diffuse power structure. And the PUC requires 3 votes. I mean, I came out of the private sector largely as an executive. I was used to, if I said, let's do X, a pretty good chance that X got done, and got done shortly, or else I had somebody's hide. I don't have that luxury anymore. I got to get 3 votes to do a lot of X. It's not just internally. It's also, there's an external group one has to court in that regard. You have the governor, you got the legislature, you got the press to some degree. And then we have this at the Public Utilities Commission, we have administrative law judges. We have approximately 40 of them. All our cases are handled, all the big stuff is it's either a quasi-legislative or a rate-making or a quasi-judicial setting, and they have different rules. We have all these ex-parte rules. It's very complicated and cumbersome. Anybody from the outside, you don't know the nomenclature. It's just absolutely baffling. And guess what? All these judges, they're enshrined by the legislature. And they're given power by the legislature to be, quote, independent, unquote. So that means, despite what I said at the beginning about having an energy action plan and a policy to follow, I mean, I thought, well, we'd have that. Everybody'd come right along, if not in lockstep, at least pretty close. Find it doesn't always work that way. There are people who say, well, that's not the way I see it, as as an administrative law judge. And as I said, the legislature has enshrined their role. I can't change what they write. I could do an alternate to their decision and all that kind of stuff. That may be a good process, it may be a bad process. But when you're dealing with things like climate change and renewables and all this, it's a cumbersome process, and it's a slow process. And I look around and I think, would it be better if we're going to have a commission form of government if you had it more like the ARB, where you had the CEO, the chair, and everyone else was part-time, so they came there not very well prepared, not knowing all the details, and so everything went along smoothly. That's kind of an executive perspective, I suppose. 7, the job is to recruit and retain skilled people who care deeply about the organization's mission. We have that now, I think. But the challenge is incredible. Our pay scale is so out of whack, not just with the private sector, but with a lot of other government, that it's pathetic. An attorney at the Public Utilities Commission who's been there 20 years is often paid less than an attorney right out of law school that goes to work for a major law firm. I mean, think about that. I mean, it's a kind of a sad situation. Even worse, this is more of a plea, I suppose, or a recognition, and get the legislative analysts here, we ought to make this point. There are 60 people at the Public Utilities Commission, civil servants paid more than commissioners. 60. I get a little spiff as the president, so there's only 25 paid more than me. There's 60 paid more than all the other commissioners because of collective bargaining agreements and all the other civil service. And this is a perversion. How can you be effective long-term in such a setup? And yet, and I mean, without naming names, I can think of one very senior person in the California State Senate who gets $16,000, $18,000 more than commissioners, and yet is very much opposed to any pay raise for commissioners if we don't toe the line policy-wise. How is government supposed to work really effectively in this kind of environment? It's very difficult. And the utilities, I must say, Peter, that who have a basic interest in seeing us do really well, are not always the most enthusiastic going to the legislature and saying, to do a little more in some of these things because they have other priorities and all that. And it's important to recognize. 8, which we do very, very poorly, is remove poor performers. And it's a matter of public policy. It's almost impossible to fire someone in government. We had one guy that walked around for 2 hours in the noon hour just around the courtyard talking to himself. And I said, when I came there, well, why don't we have him retire? Oh, God, we don't have you got to make this record, you got all this paperwork. I mean, all this. So, I mean, he did retire, but on his own volition, not on mine.
Mike, he was one of the people making more than you, buddy.
Well, I'm relieved to know that.
You went to work for you,
Yeah. 9 is to set law. I think it carried that far enough. 9 is to set long-term stretch goals and promote cultural change to ensure enduring performance. There we do, I think, a pretty good job. Our workforce is more and more reflective of the state of California than most anywhere else, including the utilities and others that we regulate. Ensure enduring performance, however, is a different matter. The bureaucracy tends to be entrenched. It is self-reinforcing, and it's a highly conservative culture. It's not conservative in the political sense of small c, but it's conservative in behavior patterns. And it's not easy to change. And to encourage a culture of risk-taking innovation, I have some abilities, and the executive director does, to promote people and reward people, but it's pretty limited. When I was at Southern California Edison or at New Energy, someone did a great job, I could say, that was fantastic what you did. Here's 2 tickets to Hawaii. You could use them anytime the next year, this kind of thing. We can't do any of that in government, not the slightest. So we're back to the Jerry Brown kind of notion of psychic income. Well, remember that, 1977 or 1978 after Jarvis, Prop 13, and he came, I was a trustee of his at the California State University. He came down and gave us a lecture about how all the professors in our system ought to be, get psychic income. They got a lot of psychic income, and that ought to be satisfactory. Well, that went over very well, as you could imagine. But, I mean, we don't have the ability to reward people in any fashion. Maybe it shouldn't be cash, although, the federal government does a better job than we do in this. Some other states do a better job. We just don't make it. However, it's not all bleak, and I want to read you something just very briefly, because this is from Sunny McPeak. I asked her some thoughts on this topic in speaking here, and she said, Let me give you a few things that I did at BTH, and so I can't vouch for the accuracy of these statistics. But she said, quote, more than $101 million in efficiencies, with $67 million on an ongoing basis, and had measurable outcomes. So, for example, reduced DMV median wait times from 1 hour to 21 minutes. Now, we don't hear about DMV anymore complaints like we used to. So, I mean, something has happened there that shows it can do this. Cut the Department of Real Estate licensing from 6 months to 2 months. Reduced by more than 50% the paperwork in the ABC. That's the Alcoholic Beverage Control Body. Reduced time for clearing of major incidents on freeways. This is probably what happened today. I got across the bridge faster than I thought after spending half an hour on the elevated there in San Francisco, by more than 30%, from 5.6 median hours to 3.8 median hours. And this is important because 50% of all congestion in a given day is from accidents. Accidents cause backup, and for every minute of backup, it takes 4 minutes to clear. I mean, these are things that, is it sustainable? I don't know. That's what I want. That's what I really don't know, and that's the frustration I have in speaking here. I think that we have, in a combination of things, and frankly, having the governor's chief of staff on the PUC for 3 years, Susan Kennedy, was great in terms of a driving force. I think that we have changed the culture to some extent of the Public Utilities Commission, made it more relevant, made it more policy-oriented, and more dynamic by far, and we're attracting young people because of that. And we get an incredible number of young people who want to come and work at the PUC today, as I said earlier, not just from the Goldman School, but all across the United States, because of what we're doing in climate change, where we're the national leader, and many other subjects, renewable energy and what have you, energy efficiency and all. Is it sustainable? I don't know. It's, I've asked Mr. Clannon, as our executive director, to let's figure out ways of institutionalizing as much of the change as is possible, so it can be transferable and it's not dependent on 1 or 2 commissioners. But whether it is, I can't answer. I'd like to think so. So I just want to repeat, and then I'm closed. The 5 major principles that we've to improve and maintain governmental performance and performance anywhere that we've tried to align ourselves with is have a clear mission with measurable outcomes, 1. 2, align all activity to achieve the mission or missions. 3, have accountability of performance, tough to do in government. 4, invest in people, reasonable thing we do, but we can't sustain the investment in people as much as you'd like. And 5, have leadership that is committed to a vision and a goal beyond the immediate and the mundane. And we'll just see how things turn out in the future. Thanks for having us. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not. I can't explain what happened with Kevin Riley last Saturday. Yes, ma'am.
Well, you answered a good question for me. I can now explain why shopping has to be psychic shopping. Dean?
That was more of a statement.
I went psychic shopping this week.
Yes.
Do you find that there are any advantages to moving to the public sector from the private sector? Have there been any pleasant surprises from having public responsibilities rather than private?
Yes. I mean, it's been very rewarding to work in the public sector because the challenges at the place that I'm at are great, and the contribution one can make are incredible. But if I was 30 or 25, I'm not sure I could stay, very frankly. In fact, I started my career, I have an MA from economics at Cal here. I worked in the federal government for 4 years in Washington, D.C., came back to California. I mean, that was all I wanted to stay in government in Washington, even though it was enjoyable. But even then, we had an expression and I was at an agency that was in the middle of the new frontier and all that stuff, and the LBJ years, which was nothing ventured, nothing lost. which I've often thought permeates too much of government, which is don't stick your head up, at all, because it'll get chopped off, and if you just stay where things will move along fine. But there has been a lot of psychic rewards in this job, and to mold public policy in this state, in the energy field in particular, but also in telecom, has been very rewarding. Now, it's aided and abetted, frankly, by, in this case, I have to say, by a governor who's been incredibly supportive of what we've done at the PUC from the moment he came into office. I'm talking about Schwarzenegger. Gray Davis asked me 2 things, and he was great about it. He said to me, you go to the PUC, do 2 things. Clean up the mess, which everybody knew what he was talking about, and he said, make it greener if you can. I think we've done both. That's all he ever asked. Never used to call it everything else. Schwarzenegger's more involved. He runs around the world on climate change and other things. But the California Solar Initiative is another example. I mean, huge public policy investments, billions of dollars. You may quibble over whether it's appropriate, whether that much public money ought to be put into things. I think these are reasonable questions to ask, but he's an activist, and it's enjoyable working with him. I don't know if I could, in other circumstances, want to, feel the same way. But it's been very rewarding. The private sector, however, was rewarding too, and not just in the sense of making money, but building things. And I started a company with 3 people, and in 5 years, it went from 0 revenues to $700 million in revenues, going to $1 billion. It's now the biggest energy service provider in the United States, called Constellation New Energy, owned by a Baltimore company. It was a great personal reward, taking customers away from PG&E. And Edison, like Ralph's stores, and the Department of Defense, and all this. It was a challenge. You had a lot of creative juices that came out of all that, and we had wonderful people there too, young, driven in many, many cases. And the great thing about the private sector that you don't have in the government sector is that every year we could review the participation of people, and those that we thought weren't cutting it, we just let them go. That's it. Just let them go. I'm not saying an absolute GE rule or 10% have to go out the door, but you had that kind of freedom. Once people get past a certain probationary period, that's it. But there's been rewards and pluses and minuses, and I've enjoyed it. And at my advanced age, it's very rewarding to be part of public policy in California. I look upon us as kind of, in some ways, a super board of directors for the utilities. We kind of set some general directions, and by and large, they've been, this company, PG&E, has, frankly, and I don't often do this, but under Peter Darby he's become green. I mean, he's a former investment banker and all this stuff. I never thought it was in him, but he's become green. The company's come green. They've endorsed all kinds of public policy matters for the state of California. They're enthusiastic supporter. He fights nationally within the Edison Electric Institute against some really laggards and all that. I mean, and those are rewarding things to see as part of all that, and to have a shared. We have disagreements, obviously, but we have shared goals now in many things is the most rewarding part of it in public policy. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that your work with the DOE as it relates to PG&E was effective? Do you think that you have a more efficient model to weather an Enron in the future?
I'm not sure of the question. Could you?
Testing. Let's see how loud this is. Do you think that your work with the Department of Energy as it relates to PG&E, do you think that it's effective in the sense that if there's a case of Enron in the future, that it will be able to weather that storm? So I'm talking from a consumer.
Because I don't know what DOE has to do with it, very frankly, but I don't see an Enron in the future under any circumstances. I mean, what we have set up policies and mechanisms now to ensure that there could never be the abuse of the system, even if a more competitive market returns to California and there's what's called direct access and all, there can never be another situation. It wasn't just Enron. It was Reliant, Enron, Dynergy. I mean, just a whole host of companies that took advantage of California's very, very bad statute and all. But DOE didn't have anything to do with that one way or the other.
I mean, they came in post, discrepancies and set up models with you and PG&E to eliminate this from happening.
Well, FERC did. FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, is part of the Department of Energy. That's true. They put on, they belatedly got involved in price caps and other things that led to the end of that crisis. But the state had been pretty well depleted of money by the time that they did, to be frank.
I just want to make a statement and not pose a question, but as someone who was an insider to the solution to the energy crisis in California, I just can't tell you about what Mike Peevey did in terms of his leadership to encourage and stepped out and really did an extraordinary job and has done that since. And I don't say this in many forums because they might think that utilities and regulators are too close, but his visionary leadership and his courage in what he did was and continues to be extraordinary. And I wanted to share this with this group. And he has really caused the utilities, I think, to think hard about their social responsibility, not only on the environment, but also in the community. And with that, I won't embarrass you any further. I'll sit down and be quiet.
Well. It's nice of Peter to say that, and with the exception of the new Bentley he gave me one Christmas, we've had no...
After the last comment, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but I hope you'll consider it theoretical and not directed at you. You started out citing the difficulties that lack of experience, the difficulties the lack of experience for commissioners created in the PUC. The other side of that, obviously, is to have people with great industry experience. And there's obviously a potential significant conflict of interest. I wonder if you can just talk about that.
Well, I don't know what the conflict of interest is. I mean, when I went on the Public Utilities Commission, I sold all the stock I had in every single company in anywhere, and all the money went into mutual funds. So I mean, I got a two strikes. I mean, now I get a crappy salary, but on top of that, the opportunities for investment in this and that and everything else was gone. The only company I have an equity position in is my daughter's now, and she sells products to Walmart, dog products. So I mean, that's. She'll be in the Chronicle next week, but you'll read about it, I think. But I don't know what the conflict is, as long as you have very clear laws, rules, and regulations as to what you can own and what you can't own. Now, there is a perception for some time that regulators, I call it the monks and nuns theory, that they should be Simon Pure and come into the job with no knowledge whatsoever. And that's usually what the advocates like, certain advocates, because then they think they could have more influence. But I think it's a very strong and healthy thing to have people that know the business in the business of regulation, as long as they are public-spirited and focused on that. The more cynical view, I suppose, is what Roosevelt did when he appointed Kennedy Sr. to the SEC. He's the first chair of the SEC, and the notion to send a thief to catch a thief. It's not a bad idea either to some extent. But I mean, it does take knowledge. It's like Mason Willrich, long career in the energy field, to be the chair of the ISO board. He knows what's going on. Some of the past people hadn't the foggiest idea what the gravity of the matters before them. So, the right thing is probably some reasonable blend of people from varying backgrounds. But I certainly am not going to speak in support of anything that would limit the opportunity of people that have an energy background to serve the public using that knowledge.
Mike lost millions of dollars by selling out early. Edison went up from $9 to $55. I'm not going to ask you what she sold at, but it was probably closer to $9 than $55. I'm serious, Mike.
Mike, if you were to look,
I didn't know that at the time, Bill, or I never would have taken the job. No.
if you were to look 2 or 3 years down the road with the change in the politics in the U.S., but with China and all the other global things that are occurring, can you kind of contrast the best scenario and the worst scenario of what's going to come with all of these things that we're doing? I mean, people in Berkeley are very optimistic about all this, right? But we've got to global world we're dealing with. Everybody's kind of looking for us to do the leadership piece of this, which we're starting to do. But if you look, and what do you see 2 or 3 years from now?
Well, the worst scenario is we just continue on as business as usual for the next 5 years. I mean, that's frankly, particularly in the context of climate change. I mean, I don't think anybody doubts, very few people doubt that humans contribute to climate change anymore. There's a senator from Oklahoma and a few others that have never quite accepted the notion, but most people now, even the President of the United States says, yes, humans contribute to climate change. I haven't heard Cheney say that, but...
He's been talking to his relatives.
Yeah. If we continue down that road for another 5 or 10 years, I mean, you're getting to it potentially, and if Dan Kamen or others were here, they would tell you, getting potentially to a tipping point where the environmental consequences can be drastic. Very, very drastic. Right? If we keep adding the CO2 in terms of parts per million to the atmosphere, we do nothing to curb it. That's a very, very scary scenario in the next 10 years. I'm a cautious optimist on this. My belief is that is not going to happen. To some extent, we're going to start making some pretty quick corrections on this. This state will do so, and others will do so. I think regardless of what happened, of who's elected president in 2008, that the next iteration in Washington will deal seriously with climate change issues. I think the imperative is so clear there, and all the staff and everyone else wants them to. But that still means several years before anything actually begins to happen. That is the reality. I mean, and both parties are equally to blame. You got this thing with the Senate where you got to have 60 votes to do anything, just about, and that means that coal states have significant power, and no one's going to just throw coal out. We've said no more coal for California, unless it meets certain very strict environmental standards. But that doesn't apply to the nation as a whole, and it's a very abundant resource. We have 300 years of it at current consumption rates, if we could clean it up. But that's the most negative thing. Very severe environmental and economic consequences, because climate change means not just that the sea level rises at an inch a year or an inch every couple of years. It sets off a whole series of other climatic changes. In this state, it means less snowpack in the Sierras. It alters the whole way we store water and use it in the spring and all those kind of things environmentally. It also means more storms, more hurricanes, all this to places all on the Gulf and everywhere else. I mean, the people that really have thought this through, with the models, indicate that. And I'm not even talking about the Greenland ice cap melting. If that happens, the sea level would go up more than a meter over the next 100 years. So those are the worst consequences. The best are if we can let me just speak very chauvinistically about California. If we could marshal all the talents, in my view, that exist in this state, this most creative and innovative state in the United States and probably anywhere in the world, and create something like which I want to see created. I've asked the university to propose to us a California Institute for Climate Solutions, and this university, in concert with the private universities and others and state government. We're in the throes of that now. And if we can do that and we can marshal all this intellectual talent and capacity in this state and focus it on solutions to climate change, we can not only do wonders in this state, but we only contribute 2% of all the CO2 emissions in the world. So we're not going to solve the problem. It doesn't make a difference whether the CO2 comes from Indonesia or Nevada. It has the same impact on the climate and our lifestyle here and our economics here. But if we can do that and marshal that talent and help and do it with Silicon Valley and create new industries and new abilities to, in a directed research manner, we can then share this with the Chinese, the Indians, and others all over the world. And the governor, I think, is absolutely right. We can profit in the right sense by doing all that. And that is the prospect that I think that some of us see for this state. And there are people that think, you know, maybe you're going too far, you're too aggressive, it's too bold, all this kind of. I think that we have the capacity in California to be as bold as our imagination, and our grasps should not exceed it should exceed our reach, you know, the old adage. And we could do it. We got the talent here in this system. I mean, hear Bob Dines talk about this. This is the power of 10 when you multiply all the campuses. But it's not just here. It's Caltech. It's the proposal from to the PUC from UC also was from NASA Ames, Lawrence Berkeley, Lawrence Livermore, the Jet Propulsion Lab will be part of that. USC will be part of that. Stanford, I think, will have all this great talent. If we could marshal it and put it to work for us, we can do wonders, be a leader in climate change, not only for California, not only for this nation, but worldwide. And we could take and put together all this other talent that's here. We have the Helios project at LBL here, and the PUC's given $10 million to Stephen Chu for that project to help build the bricks and mortar for the facility. That's to turn solar energy into liquid fuels. Now you say, how's that? I mean, the solar isn't liquid, but it's through plants and all. You have Dean Knock referred to it earlier, and it's kind of a little controversial on campus here because, with the liberal arts faculty in particular, because it's a joint project, BP, $400 million to Energy Biosciences Institute here, and $100 million to University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. But that's another example of creating new resources so that breaks hopefully over time the dependency on oil and oil from the Middle East, but also environmentally does the right things. And if we could do what I'm proposing here, and the university is proposing, and all, this will be public funded. This is public monies. You don't have the problems, the BP money or any of that kind of stuff. There's no question about anything being tainted. It's the public supporting the public. This public university, the greatest in the world, being supported by the Public Utilities Commission and the ratepayers of California. Very small amount of money, 25 cents per bill per month on your electric bill would go into this. But it'd be $600 million over 10 years. It's a lot of money to be directed research to get these minds and all going. If we can do that, we'll have done wonders. I mentioned it to the governor. The first thing he said, Mike, that's a great idea. I'll put it in my State of the State address. So you may hear that come January. But I mean, it's the big idea, and he likes the big ideas, and grasp things and run with it and be a leader. That's the tremendous potential of this university and of this Bay Area and of Silicon Valley and of Stanford. We have it here in Northern California. I live in Southern California, but I mean, we have the talent pool in this is very, very deep here. Let's maximize it for the public good worldwide. On that note, I think I'll sit down. I think it's probably the right time.
Mike, thanks very much for your cogent thoughts. I mean, clearly, this is an address that would have been great for all of our students to hear. There's a pragmatism there that's really terrific. We hope you enjoyed the evening. We've packed a lot in, and I, for one, learned a lot. I hope you did as well. I want to thank again Cheryl Rabinovich for sharing your activities as a doctoral student. That was very interesting for me. Dean Knock, for your steady and constantly incisive help throughout the school, and also for the update on the campuses and schools' achievements. Liz Hill, for your heartfelt and moving tribute to Ralph. That was wonderful and appropriate. And again, Mike Peevey, for the candid review, the accomplishments of the PUC, as well as its tribulations, dysfunctions, and the like. But it's a refreshing and gives me a lot of confidence that folks like you have a lot to say in this matter. Appreciate you all coming. It was really a pleasure to have you. Good night.